All right, cool. Good evening, everyone. I hope enough people got my message that I'm starting an hour early today. Had a bit of a rough week. Wasn't feeling too well early in the week, so I want to see if we can finish off before 12 midnight. So that gives us 2 to 3 hours to work on our little game. If this time slot works for people, I would love to know. Obviously, it gives us an extra hour. It gives us a little bit more flexibility to work on this. Master Ox already said something a little while ago. I hope he's still here. We'll see who else will come in. In the meanwhile, I'm just going to have a quick rundown of the things that have changed since the stream last week. I've done a little bit of tweaking around, not a whole lot. But yeah, let's get going and talk through the changes before we continue with the next step. First one is very obvious that we can already see floating around here in space. Our enemy ships now have beautiful little shields. Not just our enemy ships, but also our friendly ships. They have the same shields at this point in time. Probably going to tone down the effect a little bit, and I might eventually change the shields altogether. These shields right now are structured in a way that if you shoot them, they just take damage until their energy runs out, and then it's bye-bye shields. We probably will look into actually having directional shields, either by having separate objects that you can hit, or we are going to look at the direction that the laser shots or the shots are coming from and do some internal math and decide which part of the shield is going to take the most damage. That is something that I'm not sure about yet. That's for the future. For now, we have a shield that we can shoot, so we can get the mechanisms in place, and later on we can tweak them some more. Obviously, the way that it works right now is that as our projectiles hit an enemy ship or an enemy target, that then takes damage, and the logic for that is embedded in the ship itself. That means that we should be able to change around quite quickly when we do want to change the way that our shields work. Hi Prinam, how are you doing? Sorry to hear that you don't have a stable connection, Master Ox. One of the things that I need to look into someday, being a relatively new streamer, is whether I can do something about that on my end. I've heard that if I stream at a higher bit rate, that it's harder for people with lower speed connections to keep up. Anybody who has some more information about that, I'd love to hear it. I'm still learning. So, would I move the project to Godot 4? That really depends on how fast we get things done. Godot 4 is not likely to be in any production state before early next year. It's the hopeful plans at this point in time is to be in alpha by the end of the year, and beta in either December or January. Again, those are up in the air dates. Nobody knows at this point in time, because it all depends on how fast all the work is going to progress. Obviously, we still have a lot of work to do on the VR side in Vulkan. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes to see if we can actually get some of that work sped up. But those things are all still pretty outstanding. And that will have a large impact on whether it makes sense to convert this project to Godot 4, or if I'm too far along, then I'll finish it off in Godot 3. There's a good chance that I will move to Godot 4, though. There are definite performance improvements that we could make use of in our little game here. But we'll see. It's too early to tell. Hi, Rahul. Welcome. Oh, not home and the internet turns off sometimes. It sounds like you're on a wireless connection. I have been there too long. I only just got proper internet here, which is why I'm finally streaming. So, okay. So yeah, improving the way that the shields work is something that in our approach is hopefully something that we can change relatively quickly if we decide to do so. But for now, it is good enough for what we want to do. The other thing that I did is that both our bomber, our enemy bomber, and our fighters, they now both extend the friend or foe scene or class or whatever you want to name it, because there was so much similar between the two. It really is just the friendly fire protection and things like that. That is really where there are small differences, and I didn't really feel like duplicating a whole lot of code, so this made a lot more sense. That does mean that our friend or enemy groups are now added in our ready function, depending on whether I have set let's see if we can go get that back here. Boom. Whether we set this where are you, friend or foe drop down. So we got a friend or foe drop down there. I'm even thinking about making this the base to extend our player ships from as well. So because again, there is a lot of logic in here that also is reapplied to our player. So that could potentially be something that I might end up combining. Not sure yet. Still looking into that. Hello, Unsigned Fool. Welcome for joining us. The other thing you will have seen if you look at the friend or foe is that we have some sounds in here as well, and we have a death explosion. So we have a little kaboom when our ship gets destroyed. That's probably best to just demo for a minute and show how that works. Unfortunately, I can't hear the sound because it's rerouting through my stream. I still need to figure out how I can have the sound go both to my streaming machine and to my headset, but we'll manage. We'll manage. Alrighty, there we go. Alrighty. So one thing that I do want to change is I do want to make the shields less pronounced. Now it's way too easy to see our enemy targets right now because the shields just paints a bullseye on these guys. But for our demo purposes, it does make it nice and easy to shoot these guys. So you can see first the shield goes off, and obviously we'll eventually make a recharge of the shield. So there we go. Number 2, he's dead. And they're not fighting back, so this is shooting fish in a barrel. But yeah, we can do that. And because we are using the same script, and I haven't set up some friendly fire protections at this point in time, I should even be able to go over here and shoot down our friendly guys, just for fun. Ah, 4 guys. Oh, boom, he's dead. And we're evil. We've destroyed our friends. So, there we go. Now, one of the other things that I really want to change, because looking back on the videos, it is... Oh, dang it. Sorry, guys. I am so sorry. Ha ha. That's what you get when you change some stuff around. Ha! So I'm explaining all these things about these things. You guys are going like, what is he talking about? What is he talking about? All right. So let's just have a recap a little bit here, where we can see the shield effect here. So yeah. So like I said, it's a little bit too pronounced at the moment. We'll tone it down in a minute, and we can see that our bomber and our fighter are both now being extended from this friend or foe script and scene. So let's run that demo one more time so that you guys can actually see what's going on. Very sorry about that. Have to be more careful with that next time. There we go. Let's do this again. Did I maximize the screen? Yes, I did. So now we can go flying. Here we are. And again, you know, like as I was saying before, you guys could actually see what I was doing. We can really see our enemy ships way too clearly with their shields. I can shoot this guy, take his shield off, shoot him some more, and he will die. Need to make the controls a little bit less sensitive when we're up close, but there we go. We got these guys. There we are. And just to prove what I was saying before, that I can at the moment shoot down my friends, and again, that's something that I'm not sure about. Obviously, if you can shoot your friends, you have to be a little bit more careful with what you shoot at. But it's also something that players often find very frustrating. So, let's have a closer look at how that works. Cool. So, unsigned food, no. When most of my project that I do for my tutorials, I fully open source. Obviously, anything that I show here, where I'm showing code and stuff like that, I am, you know, that's totally open. You guys can use and copy to your heart's content. The game itself that I'm building, I'm currently not planning to open source. I might at some point decide to open source the code part of it. I'm not sure about that yet. That's something that I do want to do. I just need to find out how practical I can make that, because again, that is something that I feel very strongly about. That, you know, I want to show people how to build games like this. So giving access to source code, I think, is a important part of that. But because I am currently using ships that I've bought that are licensed, and because I do plan to turn this into a full game at some point in time, that I do want to publish and potentially hire people to make artwork for. That obviously is something that I don't. Well, I neither have the license to share those things nor the inclination at this point. That might change in the future. I'm not sure. But again, this is one of the reasons why I am also streaming all this, is because everybody can see exactly what I'm doing. Again, any code that I'm typing in here, any code that I'm showing off while I'm building this, that is all, you know, everybody can copy that. I'm not gonna go and say this is mine. Yeah. It would be nice if if you obviously say like, hey, Bastian inspired me to do something. That's always cool. But no, anything that you see me doing in streams is open. I just need to find out in the future if I'm going to share the code of this particular project in some sort of shape or form. That said, a lot of what we're doing here are things that I'm handling in my tutorials, and there are parts that we'll be doing here where I might actually decide to turn something into a tutorial. I'm thinking, for instance, about the particle effects that I've been working on. And as we have some more, that I might at some point in time do an in-depth video about how I've put all those effects together, and that will come with an example project that people can download and just use the source code. So that's where that stands today. It might change, again, if I find a good way to share what I'm doing without make it impossible for me to at some point publish a game out of this. I'll consider it and look into it. Hi, Christopher. Yeah, nice of you that you can finally catch a stream. That's really cool. Hi, J-Back. Space Engineers. Is it Space Engineers? I thought Space Engineers was more constructing stuff in space. Cool game though. So yeah, alrighty. I hope that the sound actually worked. Again, I can't actually hear the sound right now when I'm playing. It's also why we're not going to add more sounds today. Obviously, eventually I do want to do that. But yeah. Having a look at the shields, the basic of the shield is in our friend or foe script, where I also have a shield size that you can override. So if I want the shield size on my friendly, well, actually I had to make that smaller. So that's a size 6. So you can see, oops, if I change that, we can see that our shield automatically changes sizes. So that's all working both in the editor, so we can immediately see the effect of our changes. And it's something that that obviously works in game. The shield is consisting of 2 parts. The shield collision shape, excuse me, which is just a collision shape. Which in this case, and again, the collision shape for the fighter is actually inside the fighter itself. So in this case, we'll see the box, which is our internal fighter, and we have our shield collision over it. And basically, what I do is that as long as the shield is up, that collision shape is on, so that is part of our collision detection. But in our script. That is our friendly script. That's not the one that I'm after. So in our script, what we're doing is when we get hit, we take some damage. We check if our shields are still up. If so, we're going to lower the amount of damage given there. This is, if we do less damage, then the shield has still got health. It's just lowering the amount of damage. If the shield is going to be taken down by a last shot, this is something that I changed from the last stream. The last stream we just absorbed all the hit points and then just end of shields, and then the next hit would do damage to the ship. In this case, I'm just lowering our damage given by the health left on our shield. I'm then lowering our shield to -10, and I'm doing that because eventually I want to have the shields regenerate. And this means that we have to regenerate 10 hit points before the shields reactivate. And that means that the moment that the shields hit, that you can't have the shields come back up right before the next bullet or missile or whatever hits the ship. I'm also keeping a variable hit shields that I eventually want to use to do some shield damage effects. We then call a check shields function, which is over here. And all that does right now is that if our shields are enabled and we still have health on our shields, then our collision is not disabled. That's the one weird thing in Godot, that you disable collision shapes while everything else normally gets enabled. And we hide or show the shield mesh depending on whether the shield still has health, and that's why the shield disappeared when we turn it off. Now eventually I want to make that an animation that you actually see the shield go down, but that's for another day. Once the shields are down, we're going to check if there's any more damage left over, which we're going to subtract from our health. And then obviously when the health of our ship reaches 0, that's the end of it. I set a flag to our isalive flag to false to make sure that any scripts that like the AI and stuff like that know that they no longer can do any input into our ship. I turn all our collision layer and mask off to make sure that we no longer get any further collisions. And I call a function die, which allows any extended script to do additional things, like turn the engines off and stuff like that, or hide the ship mesh at some point in time. And finally, I play the death animation. So I've got an animation player in here, and all the death animation does at this point in time is play our death sound. So that's like an explosion sound that we heard. It starts emitting our particles for our death explosion, so that's the explosion effect that we get. And finally, at the end, it does a Q3 to free up, our ship, and then it's no longer part of our scene. And the ship has been fully destroyed. So that is basically how we've implemented the ship taking damage and the ship eventually dying. Oh, is it setting space engineers on the YouTube thing? That's interesting. Because I haven't actually categorized what game this is related to, because the game doesn't exist yet. We're still building it. Are spheres very polygon hungry? That depends a little bit on the polygon model. You have controls over it. So here's our shield mesh. That was actually the next thing that we're going to look at, which is one of our mesh primitives. Currently having 32 radial segments and 16 rings. That means that we're on the, if we go round the object, we have sliced it up into 32 pieces, and we have 16 horizontal slices. That gives a couple hundred polygons. It's not really a big budget. The bigger budget here is actually the fact that we're using a transparent material. They are a little bit less efficient to render than opaque materials, but yeah, not something I would really worry about, especially not for the sort of game that we're running here. What I'm far more concerned about is collisions. Right now, I'm using spheres and boxes for collisions. I actually was experimenting with more complex collision shapes, so polygon-based collision shapes, and that just killed the performance altogether. I was actually quite surprised at how much of an impact that had. Again, I had them generated, so there might be more optimized shapes to use. That is something that I need to look into a little further. But at this point in time, I'm using spheres and boxes for my collision shapes, and that seems to have very little impact on performance, even though we've got quite a few of them around. Especially once we enter the asteroid field, there's quite a few collision shapes that are being checked. So yeah, and again, that has to do with collision shapes. When you look at boxes and spheres, especially spheres are the most efficient collision shape that we have, because it's simply a radius check whether you are colliding or not. It's really just take the distance between 2 points, see if the distance is less than the two circle radiuses, and you know whether you're colliding or not. It's peanuts for a computer to do thousands of collisions like that. While if you have a polygon shape, things get a lot more complex. So yeah, we are going to stick with that, and that, especially for instance for the bomber, means that we actually got multiple collision shapes. So we have a box enclosing our fighter, and then we have a couple of boxes for our wings, just to give a little bit more definition to what we can hit. Especially because at some point I want to add some effects that when we hit the ship we get some sparks or something like that. That's something that I still plan to do. So the Fresnel shader, yes, I could use that for the shield, but keep in mind that the Fresnel shader is still using the alpha channel to get its effect. And what I've actually done here is a simplified version of that shader. Have a quick look at that, so we can see that there is somewhere on here a material, and I've created a very simple shader material. Can I blow that up? I don't know. Yeah. Oh. I'm not sure if I can size that a little bit more, but all that we're doing here is we're actually calculating the normal, taking the normal that is our input and multiplying it with our model view matrix so that we get our normal in view space. And all I'm doing is taking the z of our normal. So as the surface of the sphere points directly to us, we're completely transparent, and the moment that our surface points away from us, it becomes opaque, and that gives that outer glow effect. And when you look at what the Fresnel effect is doing, it's very simple, similar to this, just a lot more extra ability to not just do this facing forward, but for reflecting any light from any direction. So this also has no other lighting effects applied. It's purely that. And while we're here, might as well tone down the main transparency a little bit so that our shield isn't so overly done. Now I do plan to add a lot more logic to this, but that's not for tonight. Like I said, I want to do a effect when the shield goes down. So we're going to have some timed effect that you can sort of see the shield sort of unfurl. And that's all going to be doing in the shader. The other thing that I'm planning to do is that as you hit the shield, is that you get little ripples going over the shield. I've been experimenting with that, but it's not yet to a place where I can show it off in a stream, and it will be. It might be something that we do on a stream at some point in time, because in 2 or 3 hours we could knock something like that out. Okie doke. So that is it about the shield. The other thing that I've done when we look at our, I shouldn't have closed that too quickly. If you look at our friend or foe, I now have a spatial in there as a placeholder for hardpoints. We don't have hardpoints yet on our enemy ships or our NPC ships, but when we are looking at our player scripts, and again, this is why I'm planning to actually have this extend our friend or foe script as well, because there's a lot of overlap in these things. It's just here we have all the extra logic for the player input, and that would also allow us to more easily write our AI over enemy ships, because we just replace the input part of it. So there's a few things that I want to change there. So we got our hardpoints here as well, but when we then go and look at our fighter, we can see that I've actually got 2 hardpoint child nodes, and underneath there are our laser objects that we wrote in the last stream. So these hardpoint subnodes are just helper nodes. They first of all place the hardpoint on our mesh so that we know where our hardpoint is, and second, through a script, and the script has very little in there. It just has a gun hardpoint marker and a missile hardpoint marker, and eventually we'll put more in here. But for now, just those 2. Did I close that wrong? I did. I wanted to go here. And that just allows us to mark whether this is a gun hardpoint or a missile hardpoint, or if we allow both. You know, we might have a ship, a heavy fighter or something, where we can switch between them. And that means that the layout that we have here, the fact that we have got 2 lasers on our hardpoint, that becomes just a default layout. When we use this ship, those weapons are installed by default, but we can then later on allow the player to replace the weapons on those hardpoints depending on whatever other weapons are available to the player. And that also means that we, in our scripts, can start looking at the hardpoints that are on our ship to control what the weapons do. So right now I've moved all the logic in the weapon class itself, in the weapon scene. I'm probably going to move some of that logic into the player script, especially the logic for firing. And I've already prepared some of that. We'll look at that in a minute. But for instance, cycling through weapons or pre-selecting weapons. I only want to use the lasers. I only want to use the guns. I want to cycle them through. That is something that you can't control on the gun itself. That's something you control on the ship. So that's a little bit looking forward to once we have more weapons and we have more of this worked out, that we can start improving that part of our ship design. When we looked at the laser script that we created last time, the only thing really that has changed is that I now have an enum here where I define whether this laser is used on a friendly ship, a player ship, or an enemy ship. And that is obviously something that I set as we add them in. So I've made sure that that is now set to the player. And that allows me to use the same gun objects on my NPCs. So that's why we've got that. Now, like I said, we're probably going to be removing our primary fire or secondary fire logic into the scene itself, and it'll just be that this is classified as a gun or this is classified as missiles that allow us to map which things we shoot. Obviously, the cooldown logic and everything will stay in there, but you can see that I've now put our fire logic in a fire function, and just in our physics process, all that I'm doing is checking whether our input is pressed. I want to get a little bit more space for that. Whether our action is pressed, and whether we are a player script, because we only want to do this on the player. So my plan is for this to completely move into the actual player script itself and not be part of the weapon script anymore. That is just a player script. When it decides this weapon needs to fire, it calls fire on that weapon, and then this this script will either return yes, I fired the weapon, or nope, can't fire the weapon, or something like that. The other thing that this controls is that when I create our new projectile, is that our fire by setting is now determining our collision mask. So before, in the last stream, we had the collision mask as an actual property of our script, and I've now made that something that is set depending on logic. I've also moved the projectile layer. No, that's the physics, the layers. I also used to move the projectile layers in layer 11. That frees up my first 10 layers to be layers that basically everything can collide with. And the other layers, we can place things in that generally only they check if they collide with something, but they don't get collisions back. And that just makes it a bit easier to organize things. But we'll see if that was a good choice. I'm not completely sure. I'm even thinking about, do projectiles even need to be in a physics layer? Maybe I'm going to make them only hit things. We'll see. Hey, Joey, dude. Cool, man. Nice to have you on the stream. For everybody else who don't know who Joey is our good friend who heads up the Open HMD project. So we've known each other for quite some time now, working on Open HMD support for Godot from time to time. So very cool for you joining. Who else do we have new in? Misha van Latem. As long as you're using spherical shields, a billboard sprite with the Fresnel effect texture would work as well. Yeah, basically you could. I kind of like the fact that it's a 3D object, because it does mean that as it passes in front of other things, as other parts of it, it's properly Z filtered. But yeah, I could be using a billboard there if I decide to do so. It would probably look exactly the same. Don't think it's necessary performance-wise right now. So, but who knows? I am thinking about going down that route for our selection marker, and billboarding that and making sure that that is always at a fixed size. Not sure yet. I'm still experimenting with that. Alan, man, I'm glad that you like the shader. Berar, have I tried this on the Quest? No, I have not tried it on the Quest. I think that in its current form, it will probably have some problems. I might play around with it at some point in time, because I do want to make it possible to put the settings down to a level that this will run comfortably on a Quest. The only thing that I haven't figured out yet is the controls, because obviously with the Quest you have your touch controls, or your touch hand track devices. Got some over here somewhere. They're not very good input devices for this. We do have the little joystick on there, so I guess I could make it work like a gamepad and just ignore the fact that I'm not doing anything with the tracking. We'll see. You know, it's one of those things where it would probably be cool to make it work, but it's not something that I am targeting at the moment. Right now, this is really targeting at desktop. Although, you know, if we can get there, I would love to see this running on a PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5 with PSVR. That would be really cool. So if anybody from Sony is listening, I doubt it, but if anybody from Sony is listening, yeah, PSVR support for Godot would be really cool. Yeah, isn't it? Shit, I forgot his name now. Went for coffee the other day with him. Guy down in Brisbane is working on the touch tracking and CV1 tracking, which was really good to learn about. We need to actually spend some time on the OpenHMD plugin for Godot as well. It's running behind a bit again. I was trying to get it to build under Mason. That's still something that I want to finish at some point in the not too distant future. Because obviously, you know, a game like this would work perfectly on OpenHMD. It would really suit that that driver architecture quite well. So definitely something to keep in mind. Although I'm also playing around with OpenXR right now. That is something that we only just started about a week or two ago. Christoph Haag built. Obviously, Joey will know. Yeah, Jan. that's the name that I was thinking about. Jan. And if you have a contact at Sony, yeah, please, push him. We do have console support. There are at least 2 ports that I'm aware of that make Godot run on the PlayStation. It's just nobody has done PlayStation VR support, so I'd love to get that done. I'd love to have this stuff working on a PlayStation 5. That would be amazing. So I was talking about Christopher Haag, who Joey also knows closely, because Christopher Haag is also very involved in OpenHMD. But he did an OpenXR driver for Godot, which is it does quite a few nice things. But it only works on Linux, so I have been trying to wrap my head around things and get that to run on Windows, and we're getting pretty close. There's a few weird things that we still need to solve, yeah, we're getting close. So I hope to find some time to actually follow through on that. Time's really sparse at the moment. There's quite a few things that are sort of tugging at me and asking for my attention, and I just can't get to them because I do this stuff in my spare time, and it's only so many hours in a day. But we'll get there. But yeah, we are working on OpenXR as well. So, and OpenXR, I think, is also one of those platforms that will really fit well with what we're doing here and make it easier to port this to other platforms as well. Yeah, it's Jan indeed has already sent me all his Mason build stuff. So the work that I've done so far is based on that. I can't remember what we were stuck on. There was something that that kept falling over. Windows again, of course. Lovely. But yeah, it's just a matter of finding the time to just follow through with it. And then we have OpenHMD being built through Mason, which means that everything is actually properly using dynamic libraries, and that means it becomes easier to switch out newer versions of OpenHMD. So yeah, we really want to find the time to finish that off. All right. So we were just going through the changes of our fire script here. So we no longer manually set the collision mask. We now base the collision mask based on our fired by setting. Then we add our projectile, and that's the other thing that I've changed here, is that we now have a spawn point. So at this point in time, our spawn point is on the origin point of our laser itself. So again, that is obviously set in our base script, but it allows us later on to move that forward. And this is especially going to be important when we have something like a missile launcher, which will actually have a mesh, so that when it's added to the hardpoint, we actually have a physical representation on the ship of the weapon that we've added. Now, obviously, the guns generally are internal, so we won't see them. But the missile weapons, eventually I do want to have an object there, and that means that often you want to put your spawn point more forward, and this allows you to move that. So yeah. So that's what that is about, and then obviously the rest is the same as it was last stream. The only new thing here is we're playing a sound, which is the pew 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 that we heard. Now, the way that I have done that is we have obviously got our audio stream player object on our weapon. It's also 3D positioned, so depending on where it is on our ship, or more importantly, once our enemy ships and our NPCs start shooting, they will start making sounds as well, and we'll start hearing them from other places. I know sound doesn't travel in space. It's a game. Realism sometimes sucks. So yeah, we are taking artistic liberty there. We are going to hear our enemy ships fire at us. And then obviously 3D positioning there is makes for some nice effects. There is, however, no sound file here. So in our base script, we don't have a sound file to play. Instead, on our laser script, that's where we've put our little... I could probably play it a few times. Boom. We've added our little sound bit there. So every different weapon that we have can have a different sound that we play when we fire that particular weapon. Now again, I can't hear the sound right now, so I'm not going to bother with adding sounds to our missiles that we're going to be building in a minute. But yeah, let's see. All right, so Blender XR, that's going to be interesting to have a look at that. Yeah, GPL. What do you do? Not really compatible with what we do, but we'll see. Yeah, so indeed, using Mason for the Godot OpenHMD, that's definitely something that I want to push forward. Yeah, and yeah, looking forward to OpenHMD 0.4. We'll see what that brings. Hey John, how it going? So let's start building something new, because we've been almost spending an hour explaining all the things that have changed in the last week, and well, it wasn't that much. I was busy talking through a few things. That was really cool. So the thing that I want to build tonight is a new weapon, but one that we will fire with our secondary. And again, I'm not going to put all the new logic in the right place yet. We're going to keep going the way that we're going right now, just for the time being. So we're also going to just add one missile hardpoint just to get a missile going. I'm also not going to to worry too much about the objects and stuff like that. Also, something like the lasers. You know, the lasers right now are just boxes that we shoot forward. It's really basic, really ugly. It's just to have, you know, the code there. Eventually, I want to make that, you know, some really cool effects that we can see. And we'll you know, we'll make something nice out of it. I also want to get some guns going soon. So some Gatling guns would be really cool to add to our ship. For anyone who has played Eve Valkyrie, they've got some really cool Gatling guns. So yeah, definitely looking forward to doing that. All right, let's clean up a little bit and start closing some stuff off that we are not going to be worried about right now. Excuse me. But we are going to start at our fighter. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to add a new hardpoint. And again, right now, our hardpoints are just placeholders, just something so that we can position where our objects are fired from. So we're just going to be positioning that slightly under the wing. Pretend that we can mount a missile launcher there, and obviously that's going to become a missile hardpoint. Not that we're really making use of that yet. That's for the future preparation. Then we need to create a new inherited scene. I have to remember where we left those weapons. From our weapon scene. So we're going to call that missile. And these are going to be stock standard little missiles. We're going to start with just having no logic at all. They're just going to fire slowly straight ahead. But we will then start adding some behavior to them. Eventually, I want to have different types of missiles. So and it'll likely be such that we have different missile launchers depending on the type of missile. So you could have, and you could mix and match them, right? So if we have two hardpoints, you could have, let's say, heat-seeking missiles on one wing and radar-guided missiles on the other wing. Obviously, them being heat-seeking, they will only keep following an enemy target if they can see the exhaust. So we have to do some directional logic, while the radar ones will just follow whatever the closest target is. So we are going to start with our missiles. Now we don't want to shoot missiles too quickly, so I'm just going to put the cooldown to 1. We are going to have a ammo counter, so we're going to say, let's say that we have 6 missiles in our launcher, and once they run out, they run out. And that reminds me, I'm not quite sure if I've actually implemented that yet. No, we haven't. So we need to do that, and before we do that, I want to make sure that our ammo count is actually -1 instead of 0. Because 0 means that we've run out of bullets or run out of missiles. -1 is then I have infinite ammo. So we're going to be checking for that if we have infinite ammo, or if we still have ammo left, then we can fire. Alrighty. We can actually quickly put that in there. So we do can fire projectile, and here we say if ammo is not equal to 0. Oh, actually no, is equal to 0. Then we can't fire. And we're going to do an else if here because that's the last check that we do. And we're simply going to say if our ammo is bigger than 0, then we remove 1 count. So eventually that will come back down to 0 to 1. Did we not call that ammo? Ammo count. Should I just call that ammo? I think. I don't know. Ammo counts. Counts. Ammo counts. So. But obviously, if we have it on -1, we're not going to return because that's not equal to 0. It's also not bigger than 0, so we're not going to subtract something. So it's not going to eventually go to -1000 or something like that. It just stays on -1. But here we've got our simple, ability to deplete our ammo count, and that is obviously very logical for our rocket launcher. We just have a limited number of rockets in our rocket launcher. But for instance, for a Gatling gun would be the same thing. That you might only have 1,000 rounds of ammunition in your Gatling gun, and when you burn through it, you can fire real fast with those things. Once you run through your ammo, then all gone. And we'll need to have a reload function for that at some point in time. For now, that's all that we want to put in there, so that we have that. Yeah, let's save our missile scene. Why not? Even though I wanted to just save my script, but that's fine. Descent vibes in here as well. You mean as in flying through a structure or something like that? I could do something like that at some point. Alrighty. So now that we have our missile script or scene, we can add that into our thing here. Actually, I also want to make sure that we name that 03. Again, doesn't really matter too much, but at some point we might do something with those names. So yeah, we've got our hardpoint there. We've got our missile to that. So just for fun, just to do something visible here, is we're going to add a mesh instance in here. It's going to be a cube. Obviously, that is way, way, way too big. That is probably too small, but it's just a placeholder. I probably need to save that before that does something. There we go. Yeah, that can probably be a bit bigger. Again, with these sort of things, it's really about just having something in there. Oops. to sort of see, what is that? What are the dimensions going to be like? What are what is our placement going to be like, so that it's more easy that we can place our hard points somewhere sensible. So I actually really want this a little bit more back. There we go. Yeah, that'll do. And then at some point in time, we'll make a nice launcher model for that actually makes sense and actually looks nice on a ship. We will never see this when we're in our cockpit. We might see it when we have the missiles attached to our NPCs. So for that, it's really nice. And of course, once we have the interface for actually setting up our ships before the mission starts, that's again where we do want to visualize adding hardpoints or adding missile launchers and stuff to our hardpoints. For now, it's just a cube stands in just fine. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. But that also means that we want to go and move our spawn point forward. Now, just for a second, I just want to go and create a sphere here. There we go. Just want to make sure that's that is pointing the right way, and it's not. So we were almost shooting backwards. Good that we checked. Good that we checked. So we need to make sure that our spawn point is actually on this side. So we're going to spawn our missile there, and I'm actually going to move this even further a bit more. And the reason there is that I want to make sure that our missile sort of starts off a little forward. Maybe not too far there. There we go. Because we're going to center our missile there, and our missile isn't going to be moving at an incredible speed away from our ship. It's actually going to start really close to our ship and accelerate away from there. So if we have it starting over here and our missile does have a certain length, then obviously we're going to get into trouble there. Might go for third person, maybe. I'm not a big fan of it, but might have some fun with that at some point in time. But yeah, you know, third person, or you know, maybe some sort of camera mode or something like that, or playback mode. That might be fun. You know, could do some fun things with that, so that you can actually see your ship from the outside. Okay. So now it's time to actually fire off our missile, and here the same thing is going to apply. We're just going to have a stand-in object for now. I don't have a nice missile mesh to use. That also said, when you fire off a missile, you see it up close for a fraction of a second, and after that it's really out of your view. So we're going to do something nice, obviously, with the exhaust, so that you can actually see an exhaust trail. For now, we'll just use our little engine thing that I built before and reuse that. But I actually want to build a new particle system for the actual exhaust of the missile, so that you actually get a missile trail. So that is something that we will have a look at. But we probably won't get through that tonight. Anyway. We now know that our ball is on the right side, so we no longer need that. That was just to help us out. So the next step is to inherit our projectiles scene. And this actually needs to be renamed. That was not very smart of me, because obviously that's going to be our missile. This needs to be our missile launcher. So with that closed, and actually I need to make sure that's closed for a moment as well. Else we get into trouble with that. So, and now we can go and rename this to missile launcher. There we go. So if we open up our missile launcher, we're going to go and rename this guy as well. And now we can reopen our plane. I do want to save that. And obviously that doesn't, no, not our plane, our, where are you? Our fighter. And we're going to go and rename that guy as well. There we go. A little bit of nitpicking. Isn't really needed. That's okay. So this guy needs to be called missile. And for now, we're not going to differentiate between different missiles. We're just going to call our first missile, and that's good enough. So our missile, again, needs a mesh. Ta-da. And it's just going to be a cube for now. Like I said before, it doesn't need to be pretty at the moment. Let's base that a little bit on the size that we used here, 0.2. So I want to make that slightly smaller. Oops, this one. So that's going to be 0.15, 0.15, and let's make that one. Again, it's just a placeholder, just so that we can see it shoot out. There we go. Alrighty. So I'm gonna make this thing do a little bit more damage. The lifetime of this guy can be a little longer. Maybe let it fly around for 15 seconds. That's good enough for now. And we do need to go and create an extended script here. Come on. Extend missile. Boom. So that we can start with our with giving this thing a velocity. All right. Let's go back to our missile launcher, make sure that our missile is selected as our weapon. There we go. It's enabled. We've got a cooldown, fired by player, because right now we're only worried about player weapons. There we go. Why is that still marked as unsaved? I didn't even think we changed anything there. Alright. So let me go and look at our laser scripts. Where is our laser? No, laser beam. There we go. I'm just going to copy this as a start. Okay. Where are we? Okay. With then the difference that this obviously doesn't need to go that fast. We're going to start real slow. We just want to see what that does. Yes, I have finally got a proper green screen behind me. Just a little bit nicer, because you don't want to see how messy my room is. And actually the photo is from my desk area, so the photo that you see in the background of my of myself. But yeah, it's something that I'm experimenting with. But at least I think the green screen does work a lot better. I do have to say that it is a bit of a problem. This thing is quite large and it's quite in the way. Luckily, I can move it out of the way quite easily. But yeah, saving up for one of those Elgato things that you can pull up, it's probably a lot better to have one of those. So that's on my wish list. All right. So for now, I'm going to start with the script that we had for our laser and apply the same thing for our missile, just having our initial speed be very slow. But we're going to change this quite a lot in a minute. Now we do want to go and let me just double check what we did here. I think we did not laser, our laser beam. There we go. Yeah, we did a box shape as well. So our box shape is, in this case, is being lengthened based on our laser beam. That is something that we don't want to do here, by the way. Are we doing that here? Yeah. So we're going to get rid of that. But we do want to do that with our collision shape. So this is because, again, our projectile, it doesn't move as fast as a laser beam, but it still moves pretty fast. So I want to make sure that my collision shape extends the distance of travel of our missile. So it's always going to be slightly larger than the missile, and probably as the missile flies faster, it'll be quite a bit larger. And that's just to make sure that we don't have the missile skip over an enemy target and not hit at all. In a missile, and seeing the velocity of the missile compared to the other objects in the scene, it is much less likely that that actually becomes a problem. So for this one, we might actually turn it off at some point in time and experiment with just doing the normal, what's the thing called? I always forget the name. The continuous collision detection. So where bullet takes a number of subsamples along the path that the missile travels. But for now, we are going to use the same technique as we do for our lasers. Of course, these aren't going to be flying straight, so we'll see how well that goes. So in this case, again, we want to make sure that that becomes smaller. That is too big. But I am going to make it slightly... Well, actually, this guy was bigger, so... they are extend, so it should normally be half. So actually, I'm going to do 0.1. I want to make it slightly oversized. Again, I want to make sure that we hit things. Now, obviously, I am overriding that, so it's purely for visual purposes that I'm doing it there. We're going to do that like this. Now, this one we're going to start overriding as our missile travels. All right. Now, the last thing that I want to do, and it's going to be interesting to see whether we're going to move it the right way, but we're going to give this thing an engine. Boom. There we go. I'm going to move that to back there. That is way too big. I think that's the smallest that I allow it to be. Might actually make that a bit faster. There we go. And again, I'm just using this for now. We're probably going to change the particle emitter to something specific for the missiles, because I actually want to have a missile trail. So we'll have a look if we can make that work. Color gradients. So let's create a new gradient, because I don't want to use the gradient that this comes with. Let's see, what is a nice sort of color for our... This interface is a bit dodgy. Do I want to use blue? Because I already used blue for our friendly ship, so maybe that's... Maybe I just go more for an orangey color. Actually, I want to have this fade out to black at the end to really create sort of like a nice little tail. There you go. That might already be a good visual indication to see where our missile is going. The last thing before I forget, our missile is going to be on our secondary fire. All right. Okay. You are... Well, let's not really do that on a... Okay. Dang. All right. Sorry, Asima. You did this last time as well. So, and I did say it. I did mention on my last stream that that is not the way that you get attention. If you have noticed, I am trying to answer everybody who says something in chat. But if you go and spam, then no, thank you. That's not the way to ask people for help or ask people for information. I had some regular viewers at some point in time. If anybody wants to become a moderator, I have position open. Let's see. That's a great screen. Hi Jispa, welcome for joining us, and well, doing better than earlier in the week, so thank you very much. I hope you are well as well. Joey, I definitely trust you, buddy, so boom. Joey is my very first moderator. Easy choice when you know people and you consider them friends. Friends are always welcome to be moderators. Handle your powers with care, I would say. Alrighty. So let's zoom that out a little bit. I'm not going to put my headset on for a moment. I'm just going to see what's happening on screen. Let's go outside. And there we go. We got a missile flying away. Ooh, I'm not quite sure what that frame drop was all about. Let's see if we get that a second time. No, second time. It worked. So yeah, our missile is flying. It doesn't live long enough. That's definitely something that we need to fix. And we're probably going to run out of missiles at some point in time. But the engine trail does make it nice and visible, so at least we can see it going. Not sure what that little hiccup is about, so that's something to investigate at some point. But seeing the time, I want to finish actually making this missile work. So we're going to start with that first. All right, so... oh, my lifetime reset to 2. Oh, that's because we recreated the scripts. So that always resets when we recreate a script. So we're going to make that 15. Damage given is going to be 50 because I do want that to do more damage. So let's see if that works a little bit better and if our missiles go a little further now. Let's see if that hiccup is reproducible, because that gives me something to look at later in the week. There we go. There we go. Our missile's nicely flying away. The other thing which is important is that I'm still accelerating. So obviously at some point I catch up to the missile. Oh no, it's actually... Yeah, I can catch up to the guy at some point. Alright, so where are my enemies? Someone asked last time about my radar thing. Let's see if I can... Well, let's actually do this after all, I think. But I am just going to be... There we go. So as you can see with our radar, one of the things that I've noticed in rewatching my streams, and something that I actually want to do something about, is everything looks a lot bigger in my headset because you're actually seeing all the peripheral vision. You know, I think right now we're probably rendering at a field of view about 110 degrees, something like that. And obviously the part that's really in front of you, the part that makes things look really clear, that's much lower. So I probably want to change our preview to zoom in more so that it's more like a standard 70 degree monitor rendering, because I noticed that especially with the laser guns and stuff like that, a lot of the detail is not really visible on stream, while actually on the headset it's incredibly clear, which is the reason why I'm just holding the headset for now, so we can actually zoom into our little thing here, because I just wanted to show that as we are moving around, we can see how our little dots float around, and the idea is that you get those little stacks to be as small as possible, and you get the balls all the way at the front, and now our targets are in front of us. So, and then obviously if I nose down, you can see those stacks going bigger, and that's because our enemies are now somewhere up there. So yeah, that's the way that radar globe works, and that's a very traditional way for a 3D radar globe to work. I think this has even been done from the early Elite days. Might even be the early Elite on Amigas that already had a display like this. Obviously not nice in 3D, but they did use a display similar to that. Did we actually shoot our rockets? That was the whole reason why we were out here. I actually wanted to see if we could hit one of these guys. Probably gonna miss, because we don't have any targeting system yet, so no idea what we're hitting. This is hard when you're when you're holding a headset. Oh, that might actually hit. Are we still too far away from our ship? Did it just fly all the way through? I think it probably just flew all the way through, or not? Or are we that far away from? We're that far away from our enemy ships. All right. No, it's actually going straight through them and flying off. All right. So, alrighty. Oh, I think I'm out of missiles. Alright, so we still got a few things to fix. Okay. So we got a collision shape. That one was already being altered based on our speed. So we got our base velocity, which is the velocity that we were standing still, so we didn't have any velocity. So we're purely going to do our initial speed. Linear velocity is initial velocity. There is currently no acceleration on this guy. There is not. So not quite sure why that didn't hit. It's probably we're not really seeing very well. Ooh, yeah, I think having some temporary music is probably a really good thing to have. Actually, that would be nice. Thanks. Joey, don't let it get to your head, buddy. I don't know. There's he did it last week as well, even before the stream started. I guess he really wants to know the answer to that, or wants something, but that will always be the problem, I guess. When I do things like this. I've touched on many different subjects, but there's also a lot of subjects that I'm not even getting. I'm getting people asking me to do tutorials on things that haven't even got anything to do with VR. That's not even 3D. Sometimes I get people asking me, "Can you please do this 2D tutorial?" Not really. It's not really my cup of tea, but I guess it means people enjoy how I present things. So I do try to accommodate things as much as possible. I do try to listen to people giving suggestions and say, hey, could you do something like this or focus on this? And quite often something cool comes up, and I'll actually try and make some time for it. But as it stands right now, obviously, you know, I'm busy with this. I've still got 1 or 2 tutorials that I'm already working on around the weapons tutorial and around the interaction tutorial that I want to do further parts of. And there are only so many hours in the day, so in the end, I don't really get what people think that they can get out of it, though, because, you know, if you asked a content creator, whether it's me or whether it's Nathan or whether it's anybody else in Heartbeat, whether they can do something, obviously, you know, if you have a suggestion, it's always appreciated. But if you start spamming or start, you know, pushing someone, like you own that person doing things for you, you know, this is, I'm not doing this for money. I'm not doing this for my work. And nobody's paying me, you know, a proper salary for doing these things. This is a hobby, and I'm glad to bring everybody along. And I'm glad that I can make some people wiser and help them along with their game projects. That's the fun in it for me, right? So it's a bit sad when people, you know, when people act like that. It's I don't know why. I don't know what they think, why they think that would help, or why they think they will get something out of it. I really don't know. Other than that, you know, for everybody else, if you have a suggestion, I'm always willing to listen, always willing to try and react to something in chat, but don't go spamming people. It's not fun. It's not good. It's not the way to do it. I am going to look at that, Joey, as soon as the stream is done, not midstream. But thank you very much. I'm definitely going to check that out. Because a little bit of background music is always nice to have. Alrighty. So, do we try and dive into why we are not colliding? It's probably a good idea to have a look at that. So let's just go down to that. So we got fire by player. That means that our fire by player should be setting our collision mask properly. All right. Okay, so that should be good. Is there something wrong here? No, that's just set to our default, so that shouldn't be a problem because that's all being overridden. Maybe it should be, this guy should still be in the layer. Let's see, how's that set up for our laser beam? No, I took that out of the layer. So actually, I already took them out of the projectiles layer. Oh, haha. Okay, is that? No, it is true. That's already contact monitors on, so that's not it either. Well, the best thing we can then do, even though it'll kill our performance a little bit, is let's see if the collision shapes make sense, or if we've screwed something up with our collision shape. My cable is stuck. Yes, our FPS counter has a collision shape too. All right. Actually, this time I am going to put my headset on because I want to be able to see what I'm doing. All right. So here we can see our collision shapes, both of our fighters and of the shields. That was the wrong button. Okay, I can already see what's going on. Okay, that's really interesting. Still, will it hit or will it miss? Alright, I'm not sure if that actually hits, but boom. Okay. Yeah, I'm not. Ah, there we go. It does hit. I don't know if you guys can see this, if it's too big or small. It's probably moving away too quickly as well. But our collision shape is about that wide instead of the whole missile wide. And that is because I'm purely calculating it on the speed, and I forgot to add the actual size of the missile. Now, if we would have been moving at some velocity, that would have increased, because we're using the distance of travel. That would have increased the speed a little bit, or the size a little bit, but no, right now we need to add our size to it. Now again, this is extends, so we need to add half of it. Oh, I've already done it like that, so I can actually say, yep, just add 1 to it, which is the length of our missile. It's right now 1 meter long. So let's go and see if that solved the thing. A girl fighting game. Okay. I'm definitely the wrong guy for that. I could not model a girl if my life depended on it. That said, a good fighting game is always fun to build. Alright. Let's see. I'm going to do the same thing again. Boom. Oh, that's going way too fast. That's because I'm slowing down right now. There we go. So now we can see that our collision shape is actually... Oh, look at that. I can actually follow my missile. We can now see that our collision shape is slightly bigger than our missile. Oh, there we go. I am not very good at following missiles. And it ended its lifetime. So we now have a very dumb missile, but there's a couple of things that are wrong with it. First of all, it doesn't target anything. And then second of all, our missile isn't accelerating. So let's think about how we're going to solve both of these. Acceleration is very easy. We're just going to add an acceleration in there. Excuse me. So let's start with that first. We want to make sure that our missile, it's got an engine. It needs to go faster and faster and faster. We don't want it to travel at a constant speed. We are going to give it a drag, just the same as our player characters and our NPCs eventually, so that as we add a constant thrust, at some point a balance will be reached and it will move forward at a given speed. So yeah, we're going to start experimenting with that. That also means that as we speed up, we want to also extend the size of our collision shape to match the distance that we're traveling. We aren't concerned with the direction of travel at this point in time. We're going to keep having our missile go forward. So yeah, we're going to start with adding a damp in there. I'm just going to make that half, just as a start. And now with a rigid body, do we have a continuous thrust in here? Do we actually need to add a thrust? I think we need to add a thrust. Okie dokie. So we're going to have to track where the last position of our... Actually, I don't need to give that a default value. We're just going to make that vector 3. That means that in our set initial velocity, we're also going to set our last position to global transform origin. There we go. That's using our bases. That's also good. So we're going to record that. And now we're going to go and implement our physics process. So here, obviously, we're going to get our new position. This we type in lots and lots of times. Then we're going to get our delta position is new position, take away last position, and now we're going to update our last position with our new position. So that gives us a constant knowledge of what the speed of our object is. All right. Now in this case, we can immediately use our delta position as the distance that we've traveled. Again, we're going to add that size. I actually want to go and turn that one into an export variable. And then also our missile length is 1. And the reason I'm doing that is once we start creating different missile types, we might actually want to reuse a lot of the scripts and just tweak the numbers, so to speak. All right, let's see if everybody is writing about. Let me temporary music, by the way. I released a Creative Commons album a bit back. It has 2 sci-fi. Okay, that's all. I already read all that. Someone should make a tutorial on how to not rely on tutorials. Yeah, Robert, that's probably a worthy tutorial. Accelerate by adding a timed function that just applies speed over time and then gets removed. Now we're just gonna do an. There is a playlist for my live streams on my YouTube channel. So if you go to the main page of my YouTube channel, there should be a playlist for live streams, and there's one or two other live streams in there, but almost all of them are related to this project. So I might eventually make a separate playlist just for this thing, especially once I start doing other live streams for other topics at some point, which is in the plans. But all right. So we are going to apply a central impulse that is going to be in the direction of that we're facing, and let's just make another engine strength. I have no idea what a good value for that is, so let's just try 10. And there we go, we get that, and hopefully that will accelerate our missile away. All right, again, we're gonna test. Does that work? We still got our collision shapes turned on. That's pretty cool. All right, there we go. Oop. All right, I want to start out of standstill and see what happens. Oh, that's going very fast away. Okay, so an engine strength of 10 is probably a little bit too much. Let's just actually just leave it the way that it is and just give it a normal impulse. Might actually have to be a smaller factor. We'll see. Okay. Oh, it is accelerating. We can see that our collision shape is getting bigger. But initially our ship was accelerating still a lot faster. But yeah, it's moving. Oh, even though we're still accelerating, our missile was accelerating from us as well. We're probably going to try 2. Let's see if that gives us a nice acceleration away. And again, these are sort of the things that we really just need to experiment with, depending on the speed of our ship. Because obviously when we're standing still, which I'm going to do first, I really need to have a speed indicator here, actually. You can see that moves away. So now let's see what happens when we are moving at a certain speed. Wow, that still looks pretty cool. Because obviously it gets the speed of our ship to begin with. So, yeah. Okido. All right. Time to start putting some AI in here. And we're going to build that up in layers. We're not going to do it all in one go. We're going to slowly start building things up. In the beginning, the first step that we're going to do is our missile needs to have a target lock. Now, there are 2 parts to a target lock. The first is that when we're inside of our fighter, we already have the ability to select one of the enemy ships. But generally you want to have a timer on actually getting a target lock before you can shoot a missile. Now that part of it I'm going to leave till last and might not even get to that in this stream. I might actually, that might be something that I might work a little bit more on during the week. But the principle behind that is really simple. I've selected my target, so I know who I want to shoot at. And now I want to have 2 ingredients to delay being able to actually fire my weapon and have my missile fly to that target. The first is that I want to make sure that I'm never too far away. So if I'm pointing away from my target, I'm flying this way. I can't really see it. So I'm flying this way, and my target is over here. I don't want to have a target lock. I want to make sure that my plane is facing the target, and that we're facing the target. Actually, I might just build that in. Do we want to do that right now? I guess we could. No, I think I want to leave that till later, simply because I think it's going to take a bit too much time to find the right place to implement this. Because the check is really easy. You take the direction that you're facing, you take the vector to where the enemy ship is, the selected ship, and you simply calculate the angle between those two vectors. And if that angle is between a certain value, you start counting. And you can make that little effect going in your selection to indicate to the user that you've almost got a target lock. And then once you wait long enough, as long as you keep your target in within that site for long enough, then you have a locked target lock. And then when you fire your missile, you copy the target that you have onto the missile. If you fire the missile before then, this is a choice in the game. Some games don't allow you to fire a missile until you have target lock. Other games allow you to fire the missile, and then it's the question whether the missile then doesn't acquire a target and just flies straight, or whether the missile itself has got logic to still scan for targets. And that means that we need to do a similar approach there as well. So that's one thing that we are going to look at and are going to do, but we're going to start simpler first. The second thing that we need to look at is the missile actually keeping target lock, which right now is completely mute because our enemy NPCs are just hanging there. They're not moving. They're not going behind anything. They're not trying to evade a missile. They're not doing anything to confuse the missile. So that is also something that we will eventually deal with. And there's going to be a lot of similar logic involved there, where we're going to keep track of whether the target is within a certain degrees of our missile, so that our missile is still detecting the enemy ship. And once it's no longer in view, it's going to lose track of the target. It's no longer going to be able to fly towards the target, and it might just go and try and acquire a new target. Something that we need to think about what we're going to do there. For now, we are simply going to assume that whatever target we have got selected in our ship is the target that our missile is going to fly to. So obviously that means that we need to have a no, that needs to be a node. Do we do that? Node or rigid body? Might make that a rigid body. So we're going to have a variable here. I'm actually going to make that an export. Whoops. Var target rigid body. Export type only build. Oh, because I can't do that. Okay. Then it's just going to be a var, and then we're going to say func set target. There we go. So we just need to have a way to tell our missile that is a target that we're currently locked onto when we fire. Let's see. Oh, there's a lot of talk going on. I'm missing a whole bunch. Actually, I skipped one. Dumb question. Always wonder where people making tutorials gain their knowledge from. I think that is very varied, depending on who you talk to. I know that Nathan from GG Quest, he actually worked in a game studio at some point in time, if I'm not mistaken. I think a lot of my friends that do stream things have worked in various positions at game studios. I myself have learned a lot of what I know because in my youth I was involved in something called the demo scene, which in the mid 90s was very popular in Europe, where people would create the equivalent of little movie videos, I guess. So we would we would write our own 3D engines and 2D effects from scratch. And back in those days, everybody was busy on those things and exchanging a lot of information on how to do stuff and playing around. And it kind of stuck. So I did that until I started working, and after that, I've been hobbying with 3D engines and games and everything like that ever since that. I've also got a lot of friends who actually did start working at game studios. So in talking to them and talking about techniques, trying to figure out how things work, generally people are very free to discuss these things and very willing to, if they have the time for you, to give you enough pointers. If you then go back home and you have the willingness to spend the time to just experiment and build stuff, you start learning things. So I've been doing this for 25 years at the very least. As a hobby, yes, but still, you pick up so many things that eventually, you start building these things and you've got something to tell, and people find it interesting. They can follow along and they learn something from it, and hopefully they'll build something new with it, and they pass on their knowledge, which is really what in my eyes it's all about. So yeah, that's really it. Just doing it and trying to get somewhere. And especially when I look at when I was young, we had FidoNet, the predecessor of the internet, I guess. So we were all working on our 300 baud modems, connecting to BBSs, and having downloads go on for hours and hours, and you had some source code that someone wrote that you learned something from. Dr. Jobs' journal I've got fond memories of that. Michael Abrash did a whole series about how you write polyfillers and stuff like that, and how you make simple 3D engines and stuff like that. So those are things that you then, you read those articles and you try to reproduce it and you learn from it and you build it out. So yeah, that's really where those things come from. And you just build it out, just keep going. Yeah, we definitely are going to look into making different types of missiles, and some will be, more maneuverable, and others will be slower. And right now, for tonight, we're gonna keep it really simple. It's there's only so much we can do in 3 hours. But yeah, I wanna build on the logic that we're building tonight and make it more intelligent and make it do more. Are there other good things besides YouTube and documentation? I think YouTube is probably the primary source to get specific information for Godot itself. And I personally find YouTube to be a really useful resource in that. But Island Yan is definitely very much on the money. Don't stick to just Godot tutorials. Interesting enough, for instance, the engine effect that I've built into here. Now, I've written plenty of particle systems and played around with it. But then I saw, was it Brackies? No, it wasn't Brackies. It was another guy. That was another guy who did a Unity tutorial. And particle systems work the same in Unity as they work in Godot as in other places. Obviously, the final details are different. You set them up differently, but what they do is the same. It's a point in space that's emitting particles, and what you want to do is you want to play around with the scale over time of the particles, and you want to play around with the color of those particles, and you need to know how to set the particles up so that they mix properly. But other than that, the underlying thing that you're trying to do is exactly the same in Unity as in Unreal, as in Godot, as in any other engine where you do stuff with particles. So while tutorials for Unity and tutorials for Unreal might not teach you how to do something in Godot, they do teach you the principles behind it. Another YouTube channel that I can't recommend enough is what's his name? He does a series called Boundary Break. So if you go, if you're searching YouTube for Boundary Break, I can't remember what his name is, what his channel name is. This is a guy who, he just thought it funny one day to start doing, to start playing around with games and start breaking games and do YouTube videos about it. And eventually he got some success with that, and he started getting to know more people who started feeding him ways to do things. And what he basically does is he takes a game and he uses either cheat codes or hacks or things like that to uncouple the camera and start looking around, and he starts investigating how they do things, and sort of break the illusion that make you think that you're looking at something real. One of my favorite examples of that is when you look at a game like The Last of Us. When The Last of Us came out, and Uncharted, all the Uncharteds were in the same boat, but The Last of Us was really one of the last PlayStation 3 games from Naughty Dog. And when you play that for the first time, you are, at least I was, awed by how incredibly real that game looks. Now, I, by that time, had learned most of the techniques already, so I started recognizing a lot of them, the billboards that I used in there, where they're actually not applying shading, but where things are baked, stuff like that. But he highlights that in some of his videos, and some of the, especially the ones where he takes some of the Uncharted remakes for the PlayStation 4 with the higher resolution textures, where they've actually not changed the engine, they've just changed the resolution everything's rendered in, and the level of detail, the crispness, the high resolution textures, but all the lighting fakes are still in there. And it's really interesting because when you see videos like this where they deconstruct the techniques used, first of all, you learn how you can trick people into believing that your game looks better than it actually really does. But the other thing, which I think is really important, something that I see a lot on Facebook, like in the Godot Facebook pages, is how many people expect a game engine to be perfect and do everything for you. The reality is, a lot of the role of a programmer is to know how to fake things. Physics is probably the best example. Is why I did a whole video on the physics behind shooting a bullet, and why I'm doing these things that I'm doing here with the missiles and the laser beams, enlarging the collision shapes to span the entire distance traveled, because computers aren't fast enough to properly mimic reality, and so it fakes a lot of things, and if you don't know how it does that, if you don't know how it works, it's going to not behave the way that it's supposed to, and you have bullets traveling through objects because they just skip over them. They basically teleport over objects. So those are very important things to do. When you look at building games, it's all about just looking at what other people have done. Looking at streams like myself, where obviously there's a lot of time involved in following someone through their whole build of a game, but a lot of people, someone who actually inspired me to do this, even though I've been doing tutorials for many years, but in this format, is Finn Matrix, who put a lot of videos, like devlog videos online about his journey in building his games with Java for I don't know why he built them in Java, but he did. But he then also interchanged them with actual tutorials. Every time that he learned something in building his game, he made a tutorial about the thing that he learned. And yes, it's in Java, but still, OpenGL in Java is 99% the same as OpenGL in C++. Obviously, that's something on the level that if you use an engine like Godot, you don't run into. Godot does that stuff for you, so you don't really care about that element of it. And again, knowing how to fake things and knowing how to do things, Godot tries to hide a lot of that under the hood so that you don't have to worry about those things. And the same applies for Unity and Unreal. They try to hide as much as possible from you so that you don't have to worry about them. And sometimes to great effect, and sometimes it completely messes you up if you don't know what the techniques behind it is. But yeah, that's my biggest advice is don't just stick to purely Godot tutorials. Obviously, that's what you need to follow to know the intricacies of Godot itself. but look at other tutorials as well. Look at how things are done on Unity. Look at how things are done on Unreal. Look at how things people do things on their own engines, or where they're just presenting how they solve a problem for their game. And then once you start learning those techniques, you'll start figuring out how to translate those techniques to how you do them within Godot. Shazaz, that is indeed the channel name. Shazaz, I love that guy. His boundary break videos, for me, a lot of them just confirmed suspicions that I had about how they tackle things, especially from the older games. There's so much stuff in there where you're sort of going like, as a player, you think that you're in these really big worlds, and then you suddenly learn that actually half of the stuff isn't there, or half of the stuff is done in a way that you can the illusion only holds as long as the player is actually walking through the designated areas. And the moment that you step out of that, all of a sudden you've got holes in the wall, or things look out of perspective, or there's some really, really cool things. And the older games get, the more they've had to trick things because the computers weren't fast enough. And even if you don't need to do that today, knowing the type of things that cost performance can be really vital to making a game that performs well, even on modern day hardware, where 9 out of 10 times you don't really have to worry about poly buffer, poly counts and so on, especially for the sort of thing that you make as an indie. That's something that a lot of people forget is, to make something that looks as good as a AAA game generally means that you need to have, a large number of artists available to actually make all that content. Indie games tend to go for a simpler style simply because they have limited resources in manpower to actually create the content for a game. And that usually translates to better performing games simply because you're giving your game less to do. You're giving your rendering engine less to render. You're giving your physics engine less physics objects to check. But you still need to know the limits of a system and not just think that the game engine is going to take it all away from you. Physics, again, being a really good example. There's so many people out there who get stuck so early on in physics because they think that it's an all-powerful tool that will just solve all the physics issues, and they don't understand the limitations behind it and how it actually works. So again, like I said in the beginning of my video, is especially with a game like this where we're trying to run everything on 90 FPS, switching things over to more complex collision shapes does have an immediate effect on your performance, because it's just doing far more work than if you're using primitives. So again, these things you just learn by experimenting, listening to people who've done these things, and being smart about it. Okie doke. So now there is a problem that we have, is we obviously need to communicate to our missile that that's the target lock that we have. And here I'm going to cheat just for now. I'm going to pretty this up later, because obviously what I want to do is, in my weapon script, like I said in the beginning, I actually want to move our fire logic into our player script, because that is the that is a place where we know everything. Right now, we're going to have fire by player. We're going to have input is action pressed, boom, which is going to be our secondary action, and we're going to run our fire. But we're not going to know our target at this point in time. Our target is known by our parent. I think the way that we are going to fake this for now, but again, I want to make this prettier pretty soon, because I actually want that to be given to our fire. So target, there we go. And that means that we can over here, and I want to do that before we set our initial velocity. We want to do new projectile dot set target. Was it set target? I think so. And we need to do a check there. Yep, set target. So we're going to give our target there. If new projectile test method. We're going to duck type this for now. I might eventually put that in my projectile script, just so that I know that it's always there, even though the target is going to be ignored by non-guided object or projectiles like laser beams and that sort of thing. Too few, that's right. So what we're going to do now, just as a workaround, is we're going to, no, that's not going to be an export, that's just going to be, I'm going to call it temp target because I want to make absolutely sure that we know that this is a temporary solution. And I'm just going to set that here. And let's actually put a remark in there. I actually want to put those really together and say temporary solution for telling system who we have target on. Yeah, forgetting something. No, it's happy. It just needs to do that. And that means that now in our fire, we're going to go and add our temp target. And again, like I said before, eventually this is going to be called not in our script here, but it's going to be called from our player script where we do know what our target is. And there will be a combination of knowing what our current stack of target is and whether we have target lock. Rewrite the entire project. Yeah, that is definitely a danger. If you, again, because I've already planned out how I want to change this, I'm not too worried about it. So it's something that, why I also recap every time that I start my stream, I recap what I've changed throughout the week. I try and keep that window as tight as possible. I'm not going to do this and then say, I'm going to rewrite that a couple of weeks from now. No, I know how I want this to work. I just don't want to spend the time on it right now because it's already nearing 11 o'clock. So where I know that I can get away with leaving something as a temporary solution, I'm going to do that. But this is going to be gone before the end of the or before the start of the next stream. So it is really a temporary solution. Because you're right, if you keep these things in, you're going to get in a position at some point where you do want to revisit it. And by that time, you've built so much around it, it's going to be horrible to try and redo it. All right, so where is our, that's our plain script? Is that the one that I need to use? I think so. So all that we're going to do here is if we have a target, I'm just going to do that right over here. Because again, you know, this is, we're going to have different missiles at some point in time. So obviously this is absolutely the wrong place to do this. But just so that we are going to want to be finished at some point in time tonight, so we're going to do that like that. So I did call that set temp targets. So yeah, so once we have our fire mechanism actually controlled by our player script, our plain script here, then obviously we know which missile we want to fire. So we're going to call fire on that missile. We also know what our target is because we have our selected target here, and we'll have our target lock timer at that point in time that we know whether we actually have a lock on that target. That's something, like I said, I want to refactor that during the week because it's just going to take me too long. So for now, this is the way that we're going to send our target to our weapon so that we have that stored here. That is the reason why instead of using that directly in our fire, I am actually passing that to our fire function, because I know that eventually I'm going to be passing this from our player script instead of from here, so that everything happening from here is actually correct. So we know that when fire is called, we have our initial velocity, which is the velocity of our ship, so that our bullets or our missiles or whatever shoot away from our ship at least the same velocity as our ship is traveling. And we specify it whatever target we have a target lock on. And we're only going to send it a target if we actually have a target lock. So that's going to be the thing. Now, like I said, for now we're doing has method. I think that's good enough to do for now. Might even keep it that way. A little bit of duck typing is pretty normal in Godot. Saves us to have a lot of code in places where we don't really need it. However, I might move that into our main projectile code at some point in time. So now we know our target. That means that if we go into our missile, we have our target over here. That's being set before we actually start processing things, which means that in our physics process, we actually know where our target is. Now what we need to do is we need to guide our missile towards our target. And we're going to keep that really, really simple. This is really where it would be nice if I had something to draw on. I need to find a good solution for that for one of my next streams. The two ingredients that we're going to use here is the direction that our missile is facing and the direction between our missile and our target. So those are the two ingredients that we want to have. So facing, let's get that one first. That one is really simple. We get our global transform. We get the basis for our transform, which is the orientation matrix, and we simply get our Z. With this one, I'm always a little unsure whether Z points forward or backwards. But if our missile is going to start spinning around its axis very quickly, then we know that we're going to be facing the wrong way. Let me just fill up my glass for a minute, because I am getting quite thirsty. That's the downside of talking a lot. You do get a dry throat. One thing that we do need to do here before I forget is we only want to execute this code if we actually have a target. And again, eventually we'll add some logic here that we could lose our target. You know, if our target flies behind an asteroid or something like that, we want to, you know, if that line of sight is lost, we want to lose our target, and we want to tell our missile to reacquire a target. We're not going to worry about that tonight. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take our target, and we're going to get the global transform over target, and we're going to get the origin point. Then we're going to take away our origin point, which we actually still have in our new position variable, so we don't have to access the global transform. Always a little bit less costly. And we're going to go and normalize that. So we're going to make sure that this vector points towards our target, but it's got a length of 1. It's not going to keep the length all the way to our target. All right. So now that we have our pointer of where we're facing, and we have the pointer vector to where our target is, well, obviously what we want to do is we want to steer our missile so that it starts facing where our target is. Now, obviously, we're in space. We have inertia to deal with. That's already in there. We're already faking that a little bit because we do have a dampening effect, which, of course, in space does not exist. But, you know, we're going for a little bit of an arcade feel here because it's just, you know, real space physics makes these games very unplayable. It's a lot of fun, you know. I don't know if anybody's played the original Frontier, you know, one of the follow-ups of Elite. They took realistic space physics to the max, and that was interesting to play. Very interesting to play. I want to go for a more arcadey feel so that we can have some proper dogfights. So we have two things in our arsenal to do this. And again, we might get them the wrong way around. It's going to be fun if we do. But the two things that are important here are our cross product and our dot product. So let's start with our cross product. I'm going to call that cross. I'm going to say facing, cross, target, heading. That's the first thing that we're going to do. So our cross product of two vectors gives us a vector that's perpendicular to the other two vectors. Perpendicular? Yeah, perpendicular. So if I have a vector like this and I have a vector like that, then I'm going to get a vector that is basically the normal of the plane that is made by the two vectors that I'm starting with. So that's giving us our cross product, which I'm just for safety, I am going to normalize as well. And our dot product gives us the cosine of the angle between our two vectors. And the reason why we need them both is that we need the dot product to know whether we need to turn left or right on that, you know, whatever those two vectors are, if we need to go closer that way, or if my missile is this one and I need to closer that way. And our cross product gives us the axes around which we want to rotate, especially because a cosine, whether I go left or whether I go right, you know, if the two vectors are aligned, it's going to be 1. And if I go slightly like this, it's going to be, you know, 0.1. But it's going to be 0.1 depending on whether I rotate to the right or whether I rotate to the left. But if I rotate to the right, my cross product is going to point outwards. So if I rotate to the left, my cross product is going to point inwards. So with those two, I know exactly what the angle between my target and my heading is, and I know which direction that I want to face. Now, the nice thing about here is that we have a function called apply torque impulse. And why aren't you giving me my... all right, there we go. So, this is then the one that we need to experiment a little bit with. The apply torque impulse, I'm actually going to go and comment that out, because what we're in effect trying to do is rotate our physics body's direction that we're pointing. And normally you would do that by rotating that. So I can actually I want to do that on my basis. So if I do, actually just do my transform itself, just to get to the functions that I'm after. No, that doesn't work. Let's just find it in the help page. It's probably easier to talk to about it. Boom. I just want my normal rotation function. Yes, it is called rotated. I was expecting it to be rotate, but it's rotated. So normally when you do a rotation, you have the axis around which you want to rotate, and then you have your angle that you rotate it. So if I wanted to just rotate my transform, I could put my cross vector in there, I could put my cosine in there, my dot product in there, and it would actually rotate this object face the other object, which is kind of cool. But I can't do that with physics objects. So interestingly enough, our physics objects don't have a, you know, rotational, what's the right word for it? Like a rotational velocity that we can specify. Instead, it wants us to give an impulse, like a force that causes it to rotate in that direction. And that the vector that we give the apply something called the apply torque impulse, interesting name, that one. So the vector that we give here is the vector around which we are doing our rotation, but instead of giving it an angle, the length of that vector gives us the strength of that rotation. So we're actually not going to nicely take our missile and just snap it to where we're going. We're giving it a force that is going to cause it to rotate into the direction that we want it to face. Now, if I just put cross here, which means that I'm now providing a unit vector, this might give us a really strong impulse, and it might actually cause our missile to do some really funky things. That's something that we're going to have to test with. My gut feeling is that if we take our dot product, which will be 1 if we're heading the right way, but then we want the least amount of strength. So if we take our dot product times and we invert it, Now we get that if we are facing the right way already, our dot product will be 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. We're actually not applying a torque force. The more we are moving away from it, the stronger the forces that we're going to give to our rocket. But I do want to clamp that. I don't want that to be going on forever. So let's just start with 0.5, which is, this is in radians. So will 0.5 be something like 50 degrees, 60 degrees, something like that? I don't know. I'm not sure. We'll see if that is a good cap, because the further away we want our missile to sort of turn towards it. And to actually kind of answer the question that was asked before, do you want to make sure that the missile has a maximum turn speed, and some missiles turn slower and faster? One of the ways to work with that is to change this cap. Now we're also probably going to add a factor to this. I'm expecting this to either be way too strong or not strong enough. If this works in one go, I'd be very surprised. So let's go and have a look at whether our missile is actually going to do something halfway decent. We probably should turn collision shapes off again. So I want to get close enough to our targets so that we can select one. There we go, we got one selected. And because of our collision shapes, you can't really see which one. I just want to face away from it a little bit. Yeah, Quaternions are really cool. Once you really get a hang of them. Let's go and see what happens to it. Whoa, that's definitely way too strong. Alright, it's getting close. It's almost... Yeah, now it doesn't know what it wants to do anymore. It flies off. Yeah, like I said, the impulse is probably going to be too strong, so we're gonna have a play with that. Setting a landing point on the other side of a planet and your ship plants into it. Yeah, I'll do that. Especially because in Frontier you had to do your deceleration cycle properly, right? So if you had to travel somewhere, you were accelerating all the way to the halfway point, and you need to flip your ship around, and then you had to deaccelerate. So the chances of you getting that wrong and overshooting or undershooting your target, or going straight through a moon or a planet was that was fun. So yeah, that is hilarious. So yeah, let's tone that down a little bit. Where is my missile script? There we go. Let's go and make that bigger so we can actually see what we're doing. So for next turn, I'm actually going to go and put that a little lower. Let's see how much that already changes our missile's behavior. But I think that we're also going to have a factor here that that limits this as well. Oh, still need to turn off the collision shapes. There we go. That's looking better. You can have a little camera image of where our... So that is, yeah, if I'm too far off. It did hit my target because it's moved. So if it's too far off, it's overcorrecting. That's actually interesting. Is that because we were making it too powerful? Probably. So we probably hit it the first time because we actually... we might have to turn our max turn down even more, but torque. Let's tone the whole thing down a little bit. And again, this is often just experimenting with numbers that work. Hold on, because I keep forgetting. Let's go and do that first. There we go. Was I running it? No? No? Come on. Let's see what we get now. Boom. Still overcompensating, but starting to behave a bit better. So yeah, it's definitely over. It's going way over. I did hit it. It really goes zoom zoom. It's a cool effect, but yeah. So are we going to let's make our next turn? Actually, let's do a degrees to rad, so we actually can have a degrees. So let's say that we have a maximum of 10 degrees turn, and see if that does something more sensible. That's still way overcompensating. Dotting around a lot. Actually, before we do anything more of this, let's actually turn our torque factor down completely. But the other thing that I want to do, the only downside when we zoom in is that we lose that. Okay, that's great. Okay, I'm gonna do it in my processor. You guys may have seen this this little trick that I applied in my what you call it? My dart video, throwing the darts in the tutorial for object interaction. We're going to, as our missile flies, we're actually going to create a new mesh instance to have a look at how our missile is flying through space, and that will hopefully tell us a little bit about where it's overcompensating and how we can improve that. Now the other one, which is something that we might need to have a look at, maybe it might actually go and output dot as well for a few frames, just to see if we're actually not having one of our vectors the wrong way around, which is also possible. So what we're going to do here is for debug mesh is mesh instance dot new debug mesh dot mesh is, I'm just going to copy that from here. Then we're going to do let's just add a node, just so that we have something to add it to. Again, using a node or node 2D or any of those, anything that's not a spatial derivative, we break our transform chain, and we basically make sure that any child is always positioned relative to our origin of our scene. Debug mesh, and we're going to say debug mesh global position global transform is global transform. There we go. All right. Let us see if that allows us to see a little bit better. If you're integrating these impulses, controller are not inherently stable. Keep in mind that we're doing things in physics process, which has a fixed update speed. So it's always going to be fixed impulses. So it should behave exactly the same regardless of your actual frame rate. There we go. That is actually really cool. So here we can now see what our missile is doing. So at some point it is, oh, and of course when it stops we destroy our whole thing. So that might be a better idea to not add that here. Maybe we need to add that into that's a good question. You know what, let's actually Let me think. How am I going to do that? Yeah. I always forget. Let's actually go and run this and look at C. We're just going to add it to our root node because we're just debugging, so we don't really care about it. So root / constructs. I should just be able to put them in there. Okay, that's cool. I think that'll do. Where's the missile? So get node root / constructs. Let's see if that will work. There's a missile. So we no longer need this guy. So yeah, we could see that our missile was turning towards our target, but it kept turning way past the moment that it actually passed it. So the big question is that because of inertia that we're not able to react back quickly enough? Oh, I didn't. That's what happens when we don't have a lock. And here we see that it's overcompensating. It's suddenly way past there. I think that is because our impulse. Yeah, is that what, Inferno? Is that what you are referring to? Is because I'm giving it an impulse, so it's starting to turn at a speed, and I'm actually making it turn faster and faster. The moment that we go past, we're making it turn back. I think what we're going to do to solve that is we're also going to give it an angular damp so that we slow down the rate of turn, so that it does compound, which I'm not against, but we get a we don't get an overcompensation there. Let's see if that works. I might actually have to crank that up a little bit. We'll see. Now this is really interesting. You can see that it's not completely aligned, which is really funky. But it is pretty decently heading to... Oh, I did overcompensate when I came close. That's interesting. I can see that it's all the way off now. I wonder what we need to do about that. I'm actually going to go and make our damp really strong. Oops, okay. Really strong. Because I really want the impulse that we gave it before. Maybe we need to strengthen our impulse now to make it do something valuable. Because I really want our impulse to be... Oops, I keep forgetting to... do our target lock first. I think I'm also going to go and make that trail a little bit more. So here we can see that it overshot, and now it is turning around. Turning. And again, it's overshooting. And I think that's because when our angle gets too small, oops, that wasn't what I meant. Boom, missile. Because the closer our angle is, the less torque we're giving. I think we really should be controlling it with our max turn. And we actually should keep our torque fight, especially because now we're no longer compounding our rotational speed. I think that the closer we get to the angle that we want, the less it's actually correcting our course, which of course is silly. Okay. Well, it hit it, so that's good. But I want to make our trail more clear. So the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to add in export material var debug material. Yeah. Then over here we're going to say debug mesh dot set surface material to that one. And that means that we can go and create a material. And we are going to make that unshaded. Actually, let's keep that white so that it's really clear what our trail is. There we go. Keep in mind, because I see everybody reacting on the frame rate. Obviously, our frame rate is very low once we're inside our ship. I did a whole explanation last week or the week before about why that is, because of the fact that our carrier is a single mesh. Now, the other thing, of course, is that as I shoot our missile here, we are adding a shitload of meshes in there, although you can see it still stays pretty decent on 90 frames per second. So we can see that our missile is flying pretty well. But for some reason it is... Oh, it hit it nicely. So that worked pretty decently. So yeah, you can see that it stays nicely on 90 frames per second by now. So it's purely when we're inside of our carrier that things get a little bit messy. So I want to make sure that we shoot our missile there. So here we can see that if it needs to make a big correction, it is now overcompensating. That it has again, oops, well, hit our enemy target. So yeah, it definitely is too strong in how it can turn, but it corrects properly now. So I think I'm going to leave the factor there, but I'm going to play around with what our maximum turn is going to be. So again, you know, the moment that we leave our carrier ship, our frames are working just fine. So one of the other things that we have as a problem right now is that the well, that's actually only when we are not up to speed that it's having problems with that. Okay. Well, it's definitely going after our... Oh, now that we're too close to our ship. Ha! That is actually really cool. So because we're shooting, when we're too close to this guy, we're overshooting. And there we go. We actually destroyed our ship with our missiles. Yeah, now it's really suffering because we've got all those mesh instances. We've probably got hundreds of them by now. So yeah, when there's that many objects in there, it really starts to suffer, because this is not an efficient way of drawing that many things. If I would be changing this code to using a multi-mesh and just adding in positions into the multi-mesh, it probably would do relatively well frame-wise. But again, this is just for debugging. It's not something I'm worried about, because this is not something that we're going to keep in the game. But yeah, so our biggest problem right now is that when we're too close, it's actually it's getting there. It's getting problems trying to compensate for it. We're out of missiles. I can't test any more missiles. It's a shame. But we've got the workings of some homing missiles. I'm to wonder if there is. Let's go and up that a little more, so because I don't want it to overcompensate so much. Let's do something crazy and really make this very low as far as our our max turn is concerned. Again, I just want to see what the limits are and how it changes how our missiles react. There we go. Because one of the problems also that we have is we're shooting our missile off. Okay, so that's, I think that hits. There you go. Whoop. That definitely is not able to. So of course the missile is getting faster and faster. So it's almost in orbit now of our enemy ship. That's pretty cool. Okay. Yeah, I don't mind too much how it currently overcompensates, because it is behaving quite nicely. Okay, now it overshot it. We see it coming back. And overshot it again. So, okay, I think we've now got it too low. Let's up it a little bit. And again, this is just a lot of playing around with the values. Same with the torque factor, because we've really limited our turn speed. Our impulse might be too low right now. I'm not sure. The other thing is that right now we're not taking our delta in, so as long as our physics are hard-coded to 90 FPS, this will work. But if we make the physics fluctuate, let's say that we make settings to up the physics to 180 frames updates per second or something like that, we might get some problems. There we go, it hits. Yeah. Took out the shield. Okay. I think one of the things that I do want to change is I might want to give a delay of, I don't know, a little bit at least. Before we start turning, because right now when we face this way and we shoot our missile immediately turns. Now because we're standing still, it doesn't matter, but if we were flying at some speed, it means that our missile turns into our own flight path and we hit ourselves with our own missile. Turn that off. We don't actually do collision detection with the missiles that we shoot, but the fact that it immediately turns in is possibly a little bit overdone. Yeah. So you can see how much it's actually turned. So it's actually facing. I think we're actually allowing it to turn all the way right away. I think a turn is actually too much. Although to some extent that's probably what. I'm not sure about that. As we can see that our missile, when we shoot, it almost snaps to the direction that our target is, and then it's giving our thrust vector towards our target, but it's still moving, you know, it still has this inertia. So we're actually turning it way too aggressively. I'm wondering if we shouldn't give it a fixed turn rate. I guess we could try that. Okay, let's see what happens if we do that. So I'm gonna turn it off. I'm gonna take this thing out altogether. I'm gonna put a fixed vector in there. So this means that regardless of how much we've turned away, we're turning at a fixed rate. It does mean that if we're facing a target, we're going to ducktail. I'm not too worried about that. And we could probably put a little cutoff in there. Let's see how that changes our trajectory. So I go back to the beginning. How does this fly? So that actually looks a lot more natural. Although here we see that it is actually, it is starting to, I guess that makes sense though, because it's trying to overcompensate its own inertia. That looks pretty good actually. All right, let's shoot a missile that it's going to be. So here's our little ducktail effect, but it's actually wiggling out quite fast. I think that might actually be a nicer effect, just having it. And then we can just... we can really see that the missile is flipping around now because it's so close to... It does wobble out by the end. So it does seem to be figuring it out pretty quickly. So that, oh, okay. So we shot it down. Where is our? Oh, they're over there. Okay. So again, I just want to overshoot it. I want to see if it's. Yeah, because it's able to turn too much. Okay. So our frame update is going to be 0.01. So I'm actually going to, I am going to add delta in here. And then we're purely going to change it up with a torque factor. And I think we're going to go and use this. Let's just make that one. I'm going to call that cutoff. So instead of what we were doing before, So if dot is, because remember 1 is where they are parallel. So so what we're basically doing is if we're more than 1 degree off from facing directly, that's when we apply our torque. We're now doing another. Now in this case, we probably need to up our torque, but now we've made it so that it's scales based on our update rate. So let's have a look at what happens now. Alrighty. Now it might not turn fast enough at all now. Oh shit, that's cool. Oh my god, that's beautiful. Yeah, I think we've got it now. So let's see what happens there. So we're still turning a little bit. Well, in this case, yeah, we're definitely overshooting now, which is logical because it can't turn fast enough. But you can see by the sideways movement of our little missiles that we're creating. Here we go. You can see that it has that speed going, you know, we're going over this direction, but it's trying to turn and it's trying to overcompensate because it has its inertia to deal with. I don't know if it's still flying around or if it's stopped flying by now, but it can't turn fast enough now. But that's a matter of upping our turn factor a little bit. But that said, it's tracking. Okay, the other thing, in case people are wondering, let's see if I can find an example. I saw a few a minute ago. Where are you? Of course, when you go looking for it, you can't find it. Oh, it's interesting. Have I got it here? No, I don't. Ah. I was looking for breaks in. Oops, sorry, get out of here. I was looking for breaks in the trail. Sometimes because we're updating in process. Sometimes there's multiple physics frames between different process frames, so that's all right. I don't think our cutoff is a problem. So let's give our turn speed a little bit more force because I want to make sure that it can actually turn into our targets. Okay. Obviously, this is just a requirement of more experimentation. There we go. That hit. Can it turn in now and hit our target? I accidentally selected the other guy. Ooh, it's getting close. Mind you, obviously, we're not supposed to shoot at our, you know, if we are this far away from our target, then obviously we're not going to get a target lock. Right now we have a perfect target lock. Although, you know, that still works. But of course, if I turn even further away, like what we're trying to do right now is for it to correct. You know, when you're facing that far away, then oh, we get lucky, 2 lucky shots there. I wasn't expecting that. But yeah, we're not going to be getting a target lock when we're facing that far away. So I'm not too worried about that. That said, you know, it's there you go, boom, we've got it. I think that works pretty well. I think, you know, if this was really fighting some enemies and they are actually moving around and trying to dodge away, that's a pretty decent simulation for our missile. So obviously we want to go turn that all off. I might leave that in there. Maybe I'll eventually make that a property that we. I think that we'll be debugging our missiles more once we do some more with it. I think the only thing that I do want to do as a last moment is I actually want to put a there we go, boom, it's flying off. Is make sure that it flies forward straight for a very short amount of time. Well, again, we weren't facing it. Oh, we overshot it this time. Finish it off. Wow, I'm shooting past him. There we go. So yeah, obviously I need to start working on those particle effects for when you hit your targets. You can actually see what you're doing. We actually need some targeting reticles and stuff like that. So that plenty more to do. Let's see what Chet has all been doing, because I've been ignoring Chet for a little bit. God, will be great for this and cats. Well, I think in this case Vulkan won't do much, because the overhead in what we're doing here is actually on the CPU side. The fact that we are adding mesh instances for every one of those little blocks, and that's not a very efficient way to do it. You know, Godot can handle a couple of hundred, maybe even a couple of thousand mesh instances like that. But once you start going into the tens of thousands, and remember, we're adding one every frame, so you know that's 90 objects every second that we're adding. Flying around, you know, if a missile flies around for a minute, that's a lot of meshes that we add in, and they are not rendered efficiently when you do it like this. This is where multi-meshes come into play. Just the draw calls are off the charts when we're doing this thing. There's no optimization in that way. Also, every one of those meshes is being custom called, so yeah, not efficient ways of doing it. That's not how you're supposed to use meshes. But for us right now, we're debugging. You know, we just want to visualize our trail. We're not caring about the performance impact of that, because it's not going to be a feature in the game. What will be a feature in our game is that we actually want to have a smoke trail on our missiles, so that we can have a visualization of the missile shooting away and its trajectory that it has. And you know, when you got incoming missiles, you can see that, you know, you can visually spot them because they have a smoke trail. So again, that's where we're going to be using particles, and that's where, you know, there is a requirement to do some optimization in how those are done. Now we are on Glass 2, so I'm using CPU particles here. That's probably going to be stressing out the CPU's particles a bit. On the GPU particles, it's easy. And again, that would be one of the reasons to at some point go to Godot 4. That is something that is going to make a big difference. I could do this whole project on Glass 3, but then I lose the ability to publish onto things like Quest if I do want to eventually target a Quest. So that's why I'm doing everything on Glass 2, even though we're leaving a lot of fidelity behind, and we're leaving a lot of the higher end performance things behind. So it's trade-off. I might change my mind, you know, at some point in time, if I do really want to up the some of the visuals in this game, and I really want to stress out particles to the max, I'm going to have to switch to GPU particles, and I might decide to change this project to a Glass 3 project. And that definitely means that if I ever want to publish this on a Quest, either I need to have a fallback to Glass 2 and accept that some of those effects won't be working on the Quest, or I need to wait until Godot 4 runs on the Quest. We'll see. As far as creating a demo for this, that is my plan in the long run. I am not there yet, because there's a bunch of polish that I need to do around exporting a project. But it's definitely my intention when this project is a little further is to make test builds available to people to play around with. One of the things that I've got in the back of my mind that I'm not promising, but that I am thinking about doing, while my plan for this is to make this a campaign-based space game, is possibly doing a fun land-based multiplayer mode in this. Because before we've got all the AI working on NPCs, just testing this stuff out, you know, when we have all the weapon systems working and all that sort of stuff, it's going to be fun to just have, you know, 4 people drop into an arena and just fire on each other and just have some fun. So that's probably the point where I'll start looking into doing builds that I'll make available, and whether that is going to be available to all or whether that's going to be a Patreon thing or I don't know yet. I haven't thought that far. Try to do many polygon tiles into the tracker. I honestly don't know. I do very little in 2D, so I have very little experience with what you need to do in Godot for 2D to get performance. Not the right person to ask. All my work is 3D. I have some fun with 2D from time to time just to try some things out, but I don't do anything specific with it. So I can't help you there, I'm afraid. Yeah, so those missile track do look awesome. That's why I actually want to turn them into smoke trails, and by using CPU particles, or definitely when using GPU particles, you can do hundreds of thousands easily. But doing them either as CPU particles, or if that doesn't work, if I can't make that performant, then I'm going to do it with multi-mesh. So that's a matter of creating a multi-mesh that is predefined to be able to store, say, 1,000 points, and you just fill up the buffer as as we do a trail like this. And it might be something where we use the fact that we have our little engine trail to not update it every frame, but update it maybe every other frame or every 10 frames, because of course every time that you update a multi-mesh, you're pushing all those transforms onto the GPU. That causes overhead, so we have to manage that and see what we can do there. But yeah, that's where the GPU particles are just so amazing, because they don't cost any performance to do this sort of stuff with. So that is definitely something that I'm planning to do, and I need to have a good think about, okay, am I going to stick with less 2, in which case I need to open the box tricks, or am I going to do that in some other way? Well, thanks for joining, Joey. Have a good one. We're almost done anyway. It is it's nearing 12, so I do want to start rounding off anyway, so it's all good. Do I want the FPS as close to the VR HMD refresh rate? Yes. You want it either to match or to be a multiple of. You don't want it to be less. Then you get crazy hiccups. So the fact that we've hard-coded it to 90 on OpenVR, because we don't actually get the refresh rate info from OpenVR, which is a bit of a pain. But yeah, you wanna run it on that or a multiple of. I'm trying to run it on exactly 90 FPS, and using techniques like lengthening my collision shapes based on the speed of the projectile that I'm shooting, so that I increase the chances of positive hits on my collision shapes, and not having a bullet or a projectile skip over the target. That's one way to deal with it. Another way to deal with that thing is, I looked at that in my weapons tutorials, is upping the frame rate. Actually, in my weapons tutorial, I did this. In the dart tutorial that I did, the object handling, I actually went for the solution where you up the physics frame, right? So that the distance that objects travel from one physics frame to the next becomes smaller, which means that your collision detection is more accurate, but it comes at the cost of a lot more performance because you're doing double or triple the work. And that's all happening on the CPU. So it's something to play around with, because again, one of the things that people don't realize or don't think about is that you do a whole bunch of preparation on the CPU, where you do all your AI logic, and you do all your repositioning of objects and all that sort of jazz, and you do the physics stuff. Then you go through a process where you prepare all the instructions for the GPU, render this frame, but it actually doesn't go and sit and wait for that. It then starts processing the next frame, and the next frame, and the next frame. You're usually about 3 frames in front in what you're doing on the CPU from what's actually being rendered on screen. So that's one of the challenges with the headset, is what you're seeing on your headset is actually lagging behind about 3 frames to what is happening on the computer, which means that the computer, when it's preparing what's being shown on the headset, needs to predict where your face is going to be 3 frames from now, right? So, because if you would be rendering exactly at what the tracking at that point in time is, you're 3 frames behind on your tracking. But the nice thing about that whole thing, the whole reason why it's working that way, is your GPU might still be rendering out the images. Your CPU is already busy preparing the next frame, or maybe even already busy preparing the frame 2 frames from now. Which means that, for instance, when you look at physics, all the physics processing is happening in parallel to when the previous frame is still being rendered on the GPU. You could push some of that logic out to the GPU. That can be faster, depending on what sort of thing you're doing, but it can also mean that you got syncing problems, or you just keep your GPU busy doing something while your CPU just sits there and sort of go like, I have nothing to do. It's also one of the reasons why when you look at, for instance, the speed of GDScript, a lot of people are always complaining about GDScript is too slow, GDScript is too slow. Yeah, if you do high volume processing of things, what GDScript is not meant to do, you go and generate a 10,000 polygon terrain mesh every frame in GDScript. You won't have any performance. There's nothing you can do to make that fast in GDScript. It's not what it's meant for. But when you look at the stuff that we're doing here, for instance, building the simple AI that's in our missile, and eventually the AI of our NPCs, which is going to be slightly more complex. When you look at processing all that, it's actually happening in that period of time where the CPU is basically just waiting for the GPU to do its thing. So while it might not be the most performant thing in the world, the amount of work that it needs to do is far less than what the GPU is doing in rendering that whole frame out. So it's going to be, CPU does a bunch of things, then tells the GPU to start rendering that thing, and then the CPU, while the GPU is still busy with that, is already preparing the next frame. At some point in time, it's going to catch up on itself. We're going to be some frames ahead of our GPU. Our GPU at this point is going to say, "Hey, I've got enough to do right now. I'm not going to accept any more commands. You wait until I finish, that frame 3 frames ago, and then I'll let you, let you send me more things." And that's going to be then the moment where the CPU just starts idling and waiting. But you actually have quite a bit of bandwidth there to do things on the CPU side, because it's the GPU that's doing all the heavy lifting. Again, that's always a balance, and that's where measuring your performance and realizing that you have multiple processors that you're working on. You have everything running in parallel on your GPU. So those are all the sorts of things that will define whether your game is going to be running at a high frame rate without even falling over, or when it turns out that you suddenly hit that bandwidth limit, and all of a sudden your performance starts tanking pretty quickly. And that's a matter of experimentation and eventually finding out where your bottlenecks lie. Okay, events for each particle. I mean, at the moment of particle died to do something. On the CPU particles, I could see that would be something that could be added. Whether that makes sense is hard to say without knowing more with what you intend to do as a result of the particle dying. For GPU particles, that will be a lot more difficult because I think you very quickly start overloading the amount of signals that you get as a whole bunch of, you're going to have hundreds of particles dying all together in one frame. So that's probably going to be a little bit harder. So it also really depends on what you want to do when the particle dies. Obviously, on the CPU particles, you're very limited to what you can do. The particle has a really fixed life cycle. Basically, goes through your scale cycle, and it goes through your color cycle, and that's about it. While on the GPU side, because you're building a shader in which you can do quite a lot of things, you can really have some fun with how particles react, and stage things where it changes its behavior after it's a certain amount of lifetime. So if it's something like where you, for instance, have an explosion, and at some point you want to have sort of like secondary explosions when the particles reach a certain distance away from their origin point, that's something that on the CPU particles you could probably build that in there and keep it completely on the CPU. But if you want to do something where a GPU particle bounces off and then triggers a completely unrelated event to the particle system, say you want to have a stone bounce off, and once it hits a plane that is actually water, have ripples start in the water, that's probably not something that the particle system will really help you with. At least not within its current capabilities. Yeah, what Unreal did in that PlayStation 5 reveal trailer, yeah, that's there's a lot of work that's gone into that. I can tell you that much. That was really impressive. There's a few things where I sort of went like, okay, yeah, it's it sounds really good, but I think I understand some of the things going on behind the scenes. So I think it's playing a little bit loose with what it's really doing, especially around the polygon counts and things like that. I think that Unreal has really upped their asset pipeline in automatically optimizing meshes and bringing things back down to polygon counts that actually can be handled by the GPU. Also, I think the PlayStation 5 is probably a really beefy machine by now, so that probably has something to do with it. But yeah, still incredibly impressive what they did. And one of the things that I find really impressive with that as well is that it does allow artists, people who are really good at creating these environments, to just go loose and leave it up to the game engine to optimize things as much as it can. Where limitations would that lie, and where that's actually going to work against you, I can't say. I'm not, I'm not privy in any stretch of the imagination of what these guys are doing. And when you look at the particles, obviously having the flock of birds fly around and reacting to the environment that they do, that's something that I know that a lot of people have been asking for, the ability to have the particles react to collision shapes around things and stuff like that. There's so much there that can be done. But I think when you look at Godot, obviously Jean is planning to do a revamp of the particle system in 4. It all depends on how much time he gets for that. There's only so much that a small team can do. Pretty sure at Unreal, that's a massive group of people who have been involved in making that as feature complete as it is. And who knows, maybe at some point Godot will find enough contributors who are skilled enough at building that sort of stuff that it will start matching that. But that's reality, right? And again, I think for me the same thing goes as I said way in the beginning, and that I always say about these things. The engine is only one ingredient. A good programmer or someone who really understands assets can get a lot out of even the simplest engines, because everything that an engine like Unreal does is just writing logic that you can do yourself as well. But the other thing which I think is really important is to, when you look at that demo that they did, to get something in that level of detail and that level of complexity, that's not something you do without having a good team behind you. So is that the bar for the smaller development teams, or as you see a lot in the indie industry and people creating indie games, going for an art style that a smaller team can actually achieve, and all of a sudden the bar for performance is lowered because you're not going for that ultra realistic art style, because you know that you don't have the manpower anyway to create the environments and the level of detail in all the characters that you want to have in your game and all the environments that you want to have in your game. So you bring that down anyway, and then all of a sudden, do you then still need an engine that is as powerful, or do you then go and look for an engine that might not have that same ceiling in performance, but that might save you a lot of time because it's easier to work with, or because the scripting language that agrees with you more, and that differs very much from one person to another. There are people who look at Godot and work with GGScript and absolutely fall in love with it, and they love the workflow and they love the way of working. And then there's people who it doesn't agree with, and they sort of go like, this is not the way that I want to build a game. And who look at Unity, or look at Unreal, or who look at CryEngine, or any of the other engines, and that workflow and the things available in those engines agree more with the project that they're making, and agrees more with the people that they have on board, their own skill set. There's so many things involved in making these choices. So. Okay. So Unity 4 already has that stuff in product as well. I don't use Unity a lot. Played around with it, had some fun, helped some of our friends with some of their problems. So yeah, I don't know how far even the current Projectile engine goes, but I have no problems in believing that it can do a lot more than our current Projectile engine can do, because there's just much more that has been put into Unreal. So thank you for joining, Christopher. Have a good night. Alrighty. So we are at midnight, so I think I'm going to slowly put an end to our stream tonight. So I'll give it a minute or so more and see what comes in on the chat. But yeah, we have the makings of our missile AI. So pretty happy with that so far. Plenty more to do. This is a very, very simple implementation, purely to make the missile go towards the target. So one of the next things that I want to do, I'm probably just going to clean this up over the week. Start moving the trigger code out of the weapon code and into the player script. So that next stream we're at a point where that part of it worked cleaner. And I think that next stream we're going to start working on the actual target lock system. So working on having to keep your target in view, in front of you, so that if we're looking too far away, then we don't get a target lock. If we shoot the missile, it gets shot without a target, which means that it just goes straight ahead. The step after that is to make the missile more intelligent. And that means both in a positive and in a negative way. So I want to do two things. One is, if we don't have a target, then the missile is going to execute its own target lock. So it's going to have its own version of a forward-facing radar, or in the sense of an infrared missile or heat-seeking missile. It's going to be a variation. It's actually going to be almost the same logic. The only difference is going to be that we're going to check the angle at which we are facing, or the angle at which the enemy craft or target is facing us. So if we have our craft in front of us and our missiles here, then we're facing the rear where the heat signature is, and we're going to keep target lock. But if our enemy ship is going to be like this, and the angle towards the back of it is going to be such that there's going to be a certain point where we're saying, okay, we can no longer see the back, we can no longer see the heat signature, we're going to lose target lock. And that means that our missile is just going to go flying straight again until it finds another target lock. So that's going to be the way that a heat-seeking missile is going to be different from a radar-driven missile, which doesn't have that check. It's just going to see as long as the enemy is within my cone of view, so to speak, I'm still going to steer towards it. And only if it's going to be out of my view, I'm going to go keep flying straight, trying to find another target, lock onto another target, and then start engaging that target. So that is, I think, what we're going to be looking at next stream next week. Joseph, plans for a non-VR version of this game? I don't know at this point. My biggest problem when I look at a game like this, I'm a big fan. One of the reasons why I'm doing this project and why I got into this project is, in my youth, I was a big fan of playing Elite and Wing Commander and Star Lancer, and I didn't really play the Freelancer or whatever it's called much. But I was a big fan of those sort of games. Replaying them now is sort of going like, wow, they're really simplistic. So I'm really hoping that we can make something cooler out of this. TIE Fighter, or was it TIE Fighter vs X-Wing, or whatever the LucasArts one was, amazing as well. So I was really into playing those sort of games when I was younger, and I've always wanted to make a game like that. When VR came around, and I played Eve Valkyrie for the first time, the demo, I was not a big fan of what Eve Valkyrie eventually became. It's a beautiful game. I'm just not into that type of multiplayer game. It's fun to have as an extra, but as the main focus of the game, I got fed up with it quite quickly. But when I played the demo on the demo disc, on the original PSVR demo disc, I played again and again and again. I think I memorized the whole thing. And the same when the Rogue One X-Wing mission came out. The same thing, that was just one mission, but I played it hundreds of times. But for me, the big difference between playing the older desktop games and playing this in VR is the spatial awareness that you have in a dogfight. The fact that if you play it on a desktop, you're just purely looking straight ahead, and it's I don't think a game like Rogue One, for instance, especially with how fast the TIE fighters fly in that game, you could have that experience on desktop. And I'm really going to be interested to see what Star Wars Squadron is going to be like, whether they've toned that down to accommodate, playing it on desktop, or whether they'll up that in if you're playing the missions in PSVR. I don't know. It's going to be very interesting for me to find that out once that game comes out, because at the speed of which the TIE fighters fly around you, keeping track of them on a desktop with mouse and keyboard is so much harder than if you are sitting with your VR headset on and you've got your indicators on and you can just look to the side and you see the TIE fighter flying over there, and while you're still looking at the TIE fighter, you're keeping your eye on it, you're keeping an eye on the enemy that you want to pursue, and you then turn your ship towards that enemy. The experience is just so different. But that's my opinion. That's my experience with it. And the result for me has been is that if I then go back to playing these things on desktop, it's just even here, right? When I'm not putting the headset on, when I just start this thing up, and I'm just playing it in this, and I still want to, because again, like I said, this is the full 110-degree field of view that we're getting here. We actually need to cut off the view to about there and there, to actually get the same sort of effect. But you just so easily, I'm over here now. If I should have hold that in my hand, go ahead, track it. So if I'm here, I can now be looking over there. We've already flown too far away, but I can start. I hit my asteroid, but I can start looking around me to where my enemy is, especially once I start getting HUD indicators of where the enemies are, whether they're to the side of me or. And I plan to do that on the enemy that you've got selected. That's the one that's being tracked. That's the one that you can easily face to. I love that experience in it. So, but I might, it's on a technical level, especially seeing that the input is joystick. Basically a desktop version is nothing more than a fixed camera version of the game. So, technically speaking, it's going to be, no work to make it work on a desktop. So I don't know. I'm undecided. I might do it. I might not. Insightful, thank you for dropping by. Misha, you too. Thanks for dropping by. Tracker, sorry I couldn't answer your 2D questions, but hopefully you'll find an answer. Yeah, Freelancer, that was the one. And then EA Squadrons. Yeah, I am so much looking forward to EA Squadrons. I hope it doesn't disappoint. I had that with one of the other games that I downloaded the other day, which is actually the opposite experience. It's of what we were just talking about. That was a game made for desktop that they updated with VR support, and it becomes very clunky. Because if you don't design with VR in mind, the biggest problem that you run into is the fact that you're immersed in the world, which means that you're out of the real world. So even for me here, right, when I'm playing this, every time I put the headset on, I have to go and feel around. Where's my joystick? Once I get hold of my joystick, I have a joystick where everything is in the right, is it within reach, so I can feel where it is. And I use one joystick. So, and the same with the gamepad. Once you got the gamepad, it doesn't matter that you can't see the gamepad. You know where it is. You're holding it. You can interact with it. So if you have your whole user experience built around those sort of inputs, the experience is flawless. When you take a game that is built for mouse and keyboard, and that I do have to admit, you know, the first time I played Elite Dangerous in VR, I was amazed by how well they did this. You know, if you know, because when this was when the original Rift came out, which came out together because we didn't have the track controllers yet, so it came out with an Xbox controller. So Elite Dangerous knew, because it was targeting Rift owners, it knew that everybody had the Xbox controller. And what they did was two things. The first thing is that they made sure that you could do everything with a single Xbox controller without having to touch your keyboard. And the way that they did that was by making things context sensitive. So you had all these screens around you, which normally you would interact with a keyboard and switch between the screens and stuff like that. In the VR headset, it's the screen that you're looking at is reacting to the input that you're doing on the Xbox controller. However, even there, with the complexity of Elite, they eventually went down where they ran out of buttons. They started doing things. Okay, you know, hold the button and you get a menu, and then you select from options and stuff like that. That's kind of where the illusion broke, and that's one of my goals for this, because I'm designing this for VR with potentially going back to desktop. I'm designing it around the limited number of buttons that I have on my joystick. And even now, I'm already assigning too many buttons, and I need to start working on that. Because I want that experience that, you know, you can't touch all your buttons on your keyboard. You can't have all the different functions that you would normally be using, simply because you can't see your keyboard. You know, you got your headset on, you can't see where your hands are. So you have to solve those things. And unfortunately, that only works one way. You can design for VR and then create a desktop version of your game, and then hope that removing the spatial awareness doesn't hamstring your game. Or you can take a game that's meant for desktop and really struggle, especially if it's a mouse and keyboard game, really struggle to figure out, okay, how can I make all these button interactions suddenly work when I'm limited to a single gamepad or a single joystick or something like that. All right. That's it, I think, for tonight, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this. We've made some great progress in my eyes. So looking forward to building this out and really getting a good targeting system around this. You know, we have a really straightforward and simple bit of AI in here. This is as simple as it gets, really. There's no state machine in this. There's no additional logic. We'll have some of that eventually when we differentiate AI logic between when we have target lock and when we don't have target lock, and how we keep target lock. But we have the makings of, you know, our missile system. So so like I said, I'm going to clean it up a little bit this week, and then next week we're going to build out the whole target lock system. All right. I think that is it for tonight. Again, thank you all for watching. And I really hope that you join me again next week. So until then.